After birth, a baby clings to the doctor and prevents him from leaving the room. When the doctor checks the newborn's mother again, he immediately calls the police. Caroline, a young 20-year-old woman, was sitting in the waiting room of the public hospital next to her 21-year-old husband, Henry. They were both waiting for their turn, surrounded by the typical hubbub of the place: mothers with small children, people waiting for news, and the distant sound of someone calling for a chart. The young man ran his hand gently over his wife's belly, which was already heavily pregnant. She smiled at him, a faint smile but full of meaning. After a few minutes they heard her name being called. They both got up and made their way to the doctor's office. As soon as they entered, the doctor, Sebastian, a man in his 50s with gray hair and a warm expression, greeted them with a smile. "How are you, Caroline? How have you been?" he asked as he accompanied her to the stretcher and prepared the ultrasound machine. "I'm good, Doc. I no longer have any dizziness, no cravings, nothing strange." "The last few months have been quiet," Caroline replied, relieved as she lay on the stretcher with Henry by her side, holding her hand. The doctor nodded, applying the gel on her belly and beginning the procedure. The sound of heartbeats filled the room, a strong, steady rhythm that made the young parents' eyes light up with happiness. The doctor moved the device across Caroline's belly and then confirmed the results with a satisfied smile. "Look here. He's fine, strong, and healthy. Caroline, in 2 months' time you're going to give birth to a strong baby boy full of life." The young woman took a deep sigh of relief while her husband smiled with emotion. They exchanged a quick glance that said it all. Despite all the difficulties, their love and their wish to give the best to their son were all that mattered. "Thank you, doctor," said Caroline, her voice a little shaken. Sebastian just nodded and walked them to the door, expecting to see her only on the day of the delivery. The couple left the hospital hand in hand, and as they walked toward the bus stop, they talked about the future. "Do you think we'll be able to get things settled by the time the baby comes?" Honey, Caroline asked, her voice low but firm. "We haven't got anything ready yet, not even the crib." "We'll manage, sweetheart," said Henry, trying to sound confident. "I'll work as hard as I have to. Our son will have everything he needs. Maybe I'll get some steady jobs. I know it won't be easy, but we'll make it happen." Caroline smiled and squeezed his hand. The way to the bus stop was familiar, full of people coming and going, and they walked slowly as Caroline's belly was weighing her down. They lived on the outskirts of L.A., in a 2-room rented house, which they paid for with a lot of effort. Caroline worked selling sweets downtown, while Henry did odd jobs as a bricklayer. How much they earned was always uncertain, but the certainty of the love they shared kept them going. When they arrived at the bus stop, Caroline smoothed down the blonde hair that fell over her face. She and Henry, despite their simplicity, drew attention for their beauty. Her blue eyes and his green eyes stood out, and the connection between them was obvious. Henry, with his strong body from hard work, always kept a protective eye on her. People passed by, some casting curious glances, but the couple remained oblivious to the world around them, absorbed in each other's company. While they were waiting for the bus, Caroline was leaning against Henry, resting when a woman approached them. She looked about 40, dressed in simple clothes with a colorful scarf over her hair. "Hello, darlings. My name is Charlotte." "Can I talk to you for a moment?" said the woman, looking at Caroline's belly and smiling gently. Caroline and Henry looked at each other, a little surprised but curious. The young woman, trying to be polite, replied, "Nice to meet you. I'm Caroline, and this is Henry," my husband, adjusting her posture, not knowing what to expect from the conversation. "What a beautiful couple you two make. I was just over there, and I couldn't help but notice how beautiful you two are. And of course that cute little belly there." "Do you live around here?" commented Charlotte, smiling. Caroline and Henry looked at each other again, somewhat suspiciously. Henry took a deep breath before answering. "Actually, we live in a more remote neighborhood," he said without going into too much detail. He didn't like to share too much about their lives with strangers. Charlotte smiled in a way that made Henry even more uncomfortable and alert. There was something in her gaze that seemed strange, as if she were drawing some conclusion about them that he didn't understand. The young man then decided to be more direct. "So what do you want from us, ma'am?" he asked, his green eyes narrowed with curiosity. "Sorry, I didn't mean to be nosy," Charlotte said, raising her hands in an apologetic gesture. "It's just that I'm part of an organization that helps pregnant women and first-time parents. We give support, that sort of thing. Do you already have the baby's trousseau? The cradle, the clothes?" she asked casually, but taking a good look at the couple. Caroline sighed. Financial worries were something that troubled her mind every day. "We're going through a difficult time. We don't have much yet," she replied with a hesitant tone. The stranger nodded, as if she already knew the answer. "I see. Maybe our organization can help you. We have some donations as well as guidance and consultations for those who need it. Perhaps you'd be interested." Henry frowned suspiciously as Caroline looked at him, trying to decide what to do. The idea of receiving help was tempting, and anything that could improve the baby's life was something to consider. Charlotte continued, "Can I take your phone number? I'll get in touch and explain more about how everything works." There was a moment of silence, during which Caroline looked at Henry again, searching for an answer. The young man just shrugged, resigned. He, too, was suspicious, but the hope of getting something for the baby seemed stronger than his worries. "Sure, here it is," said Caroline at last. She gave her number to Charlotte, who quickly wrote it down. "Great, I'll be in touch soon. It'll be good for you, I'm sure," said Charlotte, smiling before saying goodbye and going on her way. Soon afterward, the bus arrived, and Caroline and Henry got on, still a little disconcerted by the conversation they had just had. The journey home was a long one, more than an hour in the crowded bus. When they arrived, they were very tired, but Caroline wasted no time. She had to prepare the sweets to sell the next day. She went straight to the small kitchen, and Henry, who didn't have a job at the moment, helped her with the preparation of the delicacies. Later, exhausted, the two of them threw themselves on the bed, the small TV still on, echoing some show. Caroline was almost asleep when the phone rang. She got up, grabbed the phone from the bedside table, and answered it, still a little drowsy. "Hello," she said, her voice tired. "Good evening, Caroline." "It's Charlotte." The voice sounded familiar on the other end of the line. "I hope I'm not calling too late. I wanted to tell you that I've managed to get you an appointment at a private clinic." Caroline blinked, confused. "A private clinic? Oh, no thanks, I already have my own doctor. I go to the public hospital. I even took my last ultrasound today. My baby is fine." "Oh, I see. But this doctor is very renowned and is also part of our organization. She'll be able to certify that everything is fine with the baby, and from there we'll be able to help you and Henry in other ways." Caroline remained silent, hesitating. Something seemed a little off about the whole thing, but at the same time, there was a promise of help that she couldn't ignore. "I understand that it may be sudden, but please consider it. The address is Maple Street 320. If you can be there tomorrow at 9, that would be great." "Oh, and preferably alone. To make the appointment easier," insisted Charlotte. Caroline nodded slowly, although Charlotte couldn't see her. "Okay, I'll be there." After hanging up, Caroline looked at Henry, who was lying next to her, listening to everything. His face expressed the same doubt that Caroline felt. "She wants you to go alone?" asked Henry suspiciously. "Sounds very fishy, honey." "I know, love, but if it means some help for our son, I think it's worth a try." "Tomorrow we'll go together to check it out, okay?" said Caroline, trying to reassure her husband. Henry nodded, although worry was clear in his eyes. They were tired, and the future was always a hazy cloud, but that night there was hope, a new possibility, even if it was full of uncertainty. The next morning, Caroline and Henry woke up early. After a quick breakfast, they took another crowded bus to the address of the private clinic that Charlotte had told them about. The place was in an upscale area of the city, far from the suburbs they knew so well. When they got off the bus, Caroline held Henry's hand tightly, and they both looked around, a little unsure. When they arrived at the clinic, they were surprised. The place was very fancy, with impeccable decor, paintings decorating the walls, and a sparkling reception desk. It was obvious that the owners had a lot of money. However, something caught the couple's attention even more. The clinic was completely empty, almost deserted, except for the figure of a receptionist, a woman with a distant look and a forced smile. Caroline and Henry approached the counter. "Good morning, I have an appointment made by Charlotte," said the pregnant woman. The receptionist looked at her with that same fake smile and nodded. Of course, Caroline, right? Your appointment is scheduled here." She then looked at Henry with a silent analysis that made him frown. The young man didn't like the strange air of the place. The receptionist just asked, "And who are you, sir?" "I'm the baby's father," her husband replied Henry, his defensive tone evident. The receptionist looked at Caroline again, almost as if she were judging the situation, and then said, apparently surprised, "Didn't Charlotte tell you that you were supposed to come alone?" Henry immediately stiffened, a feeling of worry rising in his chest. "Why does she need to be alone?" he asked, his voice now higher. "Calm down, sir," said the receptionist, trying to remain calm. "It's only because this is strictly a women's clinic. Our aim is to create an environment where women feel more at ease without the presence of men. But you can wait here in reception, okay? As you can see. The place is empty because we work to precise timetables without queues or delays to provide a more personal experience." Henry looked suspicious, clearly not buying the explanation. He was about to say something more when a doctor appeared at the door to the hall, calling for the young woman. "Caroline, is that you?" said the doctor with a smile on her face. Henry tried to follow her, but the doctor held up one of her hands, gently blocking the way. "I'm sorry, but consultations are restricted to patients," said the doctor in a calm but firm tone. Caroline looked at Henry and, holding his hand, smiled a little. "Stay here, love. I'll be right back, I promise," she said, trying to calm him down. Reluctantly, Henry nodded, letting go of her hand. He watched as Caroline disappeared from sight along with the doctor. Time seemed to drag for the young man. He stood there, restless, looking at the white walls, the expensive paintings, and the receptionist, who avoided his gaze. Inside the doctor's office, she prepared to do an ultrasound. The room was sterile, and the light was cool. Caroline lay down on the gurney, and soon the sound of the baby's heartbeat filled the room, reassuring her a little. The doctor carried out all the procedures, checking that everything was normal. "You and the baby are doing very well," said the doctor, smiling at Caroline. After that, the doctor indicated that she would do a few more intimate checks to make sure that everything was in order. Caroline nodded, and while the test was being carried out, she felt a slight pinch. Startled, she looked at the doctor. "Oh, don't worry, it's normal," the doctor said, dispelling any doubts with a reassuring smile. In the end, Caroline got dressed again, and it was then that the doctor picked up 2 large bags from a corner of the office, which the pregnant woman had already noticed. "Charlotte told us about your situation, so we've prepared some things that might help," said the doctor, handing Caroline the bags, which looked very heavy. Caroline looked inside, and her eyes filled with tears. There were clothes, bottles, pacifiers, and diapers. It was much more than she had expected. It was almost like a dream. She could barely carry it all. Thank you so much," she said, overcome with emotion. The woman just smiled back. "It's a pleasure to help. Our organization always does what it can to support future mothers like you." The doctor helped Caroline out of the office, carrying the bags, and Henry, who was visibly distressed, waiting for her at the reception, soon saw her returning, laden with things. He stood up quickly, his eyes widening as he saw the amount of items. "Sweetheart, is all this for the baby?" he asked, surprised and thrilled. Caroline nodded and smiled with tearful eyes. Henry helped hold the bags, feeling an enormous sense of relief wash over him. Despite all his suspicions, there was proof that maybe this help was real. He and Caroline thanked both the doctor and the receptionist, who said goodbye with the same artificial smile and assured them that Charlotte would be in touch if they needed anything else. Caroline and Henry left the clinic, still carrying the bags, and the feeling of relief and hope was mixed with disbelief. They could hardly believe everything they had gotten. Perhaps for the first time in a long time, they felt that the future could be a little less uncertain for their baby. The next few days were very peaceful for Caroline and Henry. With several things for the baby provided by the organization, they focused their efforts on buying what they still needed: the crib. Since Henry couldn't get any more work in construction, he decided to help in another way by selling the sweets that Caroline prepared. He would go out at night to sell them at parties where he knew he would get a good price. That's how they finally managed to buy a crib and a few other things for the baby.